And inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Reality radio, as real as it gets, only on 919.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. You're listening to 919. My name is Jack Devnarain and this is Reality Radio. Such a pleasure to have a very good friend as my live guest tonight. Ted Loukes is, where do we start? Author, researcher, explorer, adventurer, a man with a fascination for history and particularly ancient Egypt. This, as you know, Reality Radio is all about telling the stories of the people who have explored the wonders of the world and have come back to share their story with us. So, wonderful opportunity. Ted, thank you for being in studio with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. What a fantastic intro. I'll just keep that one.
Yes, yeah. No, you should, because you don't realize what a big deal it is for somebody like myself to imagine the adventures taking place, not just in Egypt, but the place that you've chosen to embark on your adventure is ancient Egypt. To what extent does ancient Egypt still live today?
A lot. I think people don't understand ancient Egypt. There's old Egypt, there's ancient Egypt, and then there's the real ancient Egypt. So if you think of the timeline of ancient Egypt, know that the pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramid, and that, is older or further away from Cleopatra than we are. We're closer to her.
Oh, come on.
In time. Absolutely.
So a linear timeline.
Yes.
Tracking from the time that the Great Pyramids were built up to modern day, up to this modern day, we've got Cleopatra sitting closer to where we are.
Yes.
Than she is to the pyramids being built.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And further evidence, you can go to the Valley of the Kings in Luxor, and there are open tombs there that have got Roman graffiti because the Romans went to visit them because they were antiquities then, and they've got, like Gaius Julius was here.
Oh, come on.
But they have.
That's like a real Monty Python skit.
But it's true.
Romani domum eunt.
That's right. That's indeed.
I love that.
Romans go home.
But that's so this fascination of yours with ancient Egypt started where and when?
A long time ago. Not as far back as Cleopatra.
No, I hope not. Yeah.
It really started when I think it kind of cemented itself when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
So 10 years old would take me back to 1972. And that was the 50th anniversary of the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter. And there was an exhibition of 50 pieces that went to the British Museum to celebrate this fact, including the famous golden mask. And so my grandfather and I had done a lot of research on ancient civilizations. Even at that age, I was fascinated by ancient civilizations. And we did stuff in everything from kind of Atlantis to Stonehenge to whatever. They were all fair game. And when this exhibition came up, he said to me, as far as I remember, he said, let's go and do this. And we went, me as a 10-year-old and him as a slightly older. And we queued for, I think it was 11 hours.
Really?
Yes. Because the queue was huge and went round the entire museum. So we started off in a street behind the museum and queued. And I think it was 11 o'clock in the morning where we finally got into the gates of the British Museum. And we've been there since 7 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was bizarre that these queues just snaked backwards and forwards across the forecourt. And then to actually go to the exhibition itself, in under an hour, we were out.
After all of that?
Because there was no time to stop and do anything. They moved you along. There were so many people. There were thousands and thousands of people went to see this amazing exhibition of stuff that had never been, out of Egypt and certainly not on British soil. And that, for me, was a very special thing, and I've never lost that, never let go of it. And it was in 2012 when I actually saw The Mask again, 40 years later.
Really?
And it was a very emotional moment, very strange, to think here I am, like 40, whatever I was, and suddenly to be confronted by this mask that had been so important to me then. And it's just stayed with me, and I've just got further and further into it to the point where, yes, probably obsession, it's got like that, but in a good way, not in a bad way.
I was about to say that, because we know people with obsessions, and they're not entirely dark, negative, or destructive. Often there are very powerful obsessions that actually make things better for people, because it takes a singular focus for somebody to accumulate the years of research that you need in order to create something new. So here's, I'm just wondering, 40 years after you first see The Mask, you see it again. At that point, had you written the book?
No.
Not yet, okay.
No. So then the reason I went back to Egypt, went to Egypt in 2012, was because I'd started work on writing it. So, and again, it goes back further. I was writing a series of blogs about unexplained things, mysteries, both past and present. So I was looking at everything from Atlantis to, at the time it was Fukushima. I was looking at those as like, what is the problem here? What happened? I was writing this stuff, and I came across the story of a potential link between the pharaoh Akhenaten, who is supposedly Tutankhamun's father, just to place him, and the biblical character of Moses. And that they were linked. And I think in the original one, the original piece I read, it was suggesting that they were the same person.
Really? Okay.
So I started work on that, and I wrote like one blog, and then there was more to write, and I started doing research. And unfortunately, once I start doing research, there's a rabbit hole, and that's I'm gone, and I can stay there for hours. And by the time I got to 3 posts on this subject, I realized that there was much more going on than was generally available. And then I started doing research, and there was an opportunity to join a tour that was going at the end of 2012, because we all thought the world was going to end.
Of course, that was according to the Mayan legend.
Well, yes, supposedly.
Among others, I suppose,
but as a place to be, if the world was going to end,
why not?
Yeah, why not? So anyway, and as luck would have it, I couldn't make it. I couldn't get there for that tour. And I thought, well, I can't not go now. So I was handing out flyers at Robots dressed in a pharaoh costume.
Oh, come on.
No, I was. There are photos
somewhere. Are there photos?
There are photos somewhere. Handing out flyers trying to raise money. And I managed to get together with a lot of people, volunteered and donated money to me. People I knew from work and family and stuff like that, which was absolutely beautiful. And I managed to go, but on my own. And it kind of changed my life, really.
So I think this now is the perfect point at which you're going to launch into the research and the book that you authored, that's recognized around the world as a very powerful, authoritative piece of research. And just to be able to draw the parallel between Moses and Tutankhamun's father. That's just going to, I think that's going to be the conversation coming back after the break. We're going to take a short break now. So this is Ted Loukes, author, adventurer, talking about ancient Egypt, the myths and the legends. We'll be back after the short break.
919 Top 40 with Linda Mbuso.
It's such a weird dream. So me, Doja Cat, we have a chat, and I'm like, hey, Doja, I got your song on the chart, we're playing it, blah, 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 something like that. She's like, okay, cool, thank you very much. I go off and I meet a friend of mine, right? And then she's driving past slowly, then I say, bye, Doja.
It's giving groupie vibes, but okay.
But I'm just saying bye to her because she's driving past me, and it's going to be awkward pretending we just didn't chat. So I say, bye, Doja. This is what Doja says to the guy driving. He's so irritating.
But even in your dreams, you're irritating.
I said what I said.
Every Saturday from 3 to 7 p.m.
Have a groundbreaking tech startup or hackathon idea? Empire Partner Foundation's Incubation Hub is here to nurture your vision. Our incubation hub provides the perfect environment for startups and hackathons to grow, access resources, and make their mark in the tech world. Join us at EPF's Incubation Hub and turn your tech dream into reality. Visit our website for more information on how we can help your startup thrive at empirepartnerfoundation.org.
It's as real as it gets on a Friday night. It's Reality Radio with me, Jack Devnarain, and in studio tonight, Ted Loukes, talking to us about his research, putting together, and this was amazing because you're saying it was an article that you had come across, linking the character of Moses, the biblical character of Moses, with an ancient Egyptian character, the father of Tutankhamun.
Yes.
So, do you think that... Obviously, that was the starting point for you. What you found in that article was enough to set you off down your own rabbit hole.
Very much so. Very much so. I think once I was going, because there's no immediate correlation. If you go and look in the Bible, you're not going to find that information there. So it was a question of what I realized I had to do was find a common point in Egyptian history and biblical history, accepting that the Old Testament is perhaps messed up, but really a history of the establishment of a nation. Okay. Rather than let's look at it, let's take it that way as a history. And so I looked at the characters, and there's one character who stands out both in Egyptian history and in biblical times, which is that of Joseph, Joseph of the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And his positions and roles that he's given in the Bible reflect a man who existed in what's called the New Kingdom in Egypt, whose name was Yuyu. Okay, and he was the Grand Vizier and various things for the king Thutmose IV. And there are all these similarities. So he was found in his tomb with the same necklace that is referenced in the Bible. There's a reference to him being the God's father, and that happens in the Bible and also in Egyptian texts. There was the fact he was a commander of the chariotry, okay, which also set it quite definitely because horses and chariots were only introduced into Egypt at a certain period.
Right.
So anything prior to that, it couldn't have been there.
He couldn't have existed.
He couldn't have existed then. So those kind of pointers. So we gradually began to paint a picture of these two characters who are very, very similar in what they have. And even the burial of Yuyu, when he was discovered about 10, 15 years before Tutankhamun. Okay, also in the Valley of the Kings, but he wasn't a king, so it was accorded a very, very high position in society and in the royal court. And when you look at him, when you look at his mummy, and you say, but this is not like the other Egyptians. And he's, instead of lying there in that Osirid position that we all know so well, he was lying there with his hands like this, like in supplication. His name is unusual because it's all vowels. And the Egyptian hieroglyph at the time, the hieroglyphic writing, there are no vowels used in it. So his name is spelled differently. Like people who did the burial stuff and the burial goods didn't know how to spell his name. He's altogether a quite enigmatic character. And he seemed to fit this Joseph character. And then so if we drag those two timelines so they're together, and we start looking down, and we eventually come to the point where the potential Moses is a prince of Egypt, you know. And so what happened after Thutmose IV? There was Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III had, first of all, he had a boy who was called Thutmose, okay, who is believed to have died, but all that happens is he disappears from the record.
Okay.
He doesn't. There's nowhere that says this is him dead. This is his tomb. This is where he's buried. He just disappears, which is a fairly standard thing where people are kind of dismissed. And his brother was Amenhotep IV, who was to become Akhenaten, the heretic who changed everything to a monotheistic structure and caused huge chaos in Egypt. So I started looking at the Thutmose character and started looking at the legends of Moses. So
Yeah.
moving away from the Bible, but other stories that suddenly started to correlate with what was going on in Egypt. So there's a legend that Moses didn't disappear after he rose up and slew the Egyptian because the building sites of the Pharaoh. He disappeared, according to the Bible, and disappeared to Midian. But I found legends that talked about him going south to Cush and becoming the king of Cush and ruling that part of Egypt. All important stuff, and I was going, but where is this character then? Where is he in Egyptian history? And then I found out, purely by chance, that there'd been a mistranslation or a mistranslation of the hieroglyphs for the viceroy of Cush under Akhenaten, who was called Thutmose. And suddenly you start to go, well, that's very close, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what Moses has done is he's dropped the kind of God prefix.
Yes.
Because Tut is Thoth, Jehuti, it's a God thing. It's
Okay.
like Ramesses is Ra, Messes, so it means born of Ra, or Amenhotep, Amun is satisfied. It's a God thing, so
Okay.
he drops that. And it was banished from the court and disappears down south and looking after Cush. And all these things just came into place and just correlated time and time again. And I carried it on, and we looked then to what happened with Moses and the Exodus, because the Exodus is a whole area of biblical history that seemingly doesn't appear in Egyptian history.
Okay.
But what does appear in Egyptian history, if you know where to look, are the references to the plagues.
Oh, yes, of course. Because that's a big part of what people commonly use as reference points in various religious texts. Now, you're not a religious man, are you?
Not in that sense, no.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, for the years that we've known each other, I don't think you've come across as a religious man, shaped by doctrine or anything like that. But certainly, you would have a fascination and an interest in those disasters, the natural disasters as described by the Bible, and so many others.
Yeah, absolutely. And the plagues, particularly, what intrigued me was how they are natural disasters. And I think the one that everyone has fallen over on is the last one, which is the advent of Passover, which is where we are now.
Right. Yeah.
In time, and that is the killing of the firstborn child of the Egyptian population. But I believe that, again, a lot of it comes down to words that are used, words that are written.
I see. Okay.
And we're dealing in ancient Hebrew, in ancient Egyptian.
Yeah.
We're dealing in languages that are written without vowels. But a vowel sound makes a huge difference to a word. So I believe that where the Bible says the firstborn, what it actually meant was the chosen. Okay? So, and by chosen, I'm talking about the elite of society, as opposed to the firstborn of every
home.
Of every home, absolutely. And then if you look at the way Egyptian life was structured, where the majority of buildings, and certainly in the Delta area, were all mud brick, and they stand earthquakes. The palaces, the royal temples, are all made of stone that don't work with earthquakes.
Of course.
So I believe that what happened was that an earthquake hit, and I think this is all part of the greater Thera eruption that happened in the Aegean Sea.
Okay.
And which is a long, complicated history story. But so I think that what happened was that at the culmination of the plagues was this massive earthquake, and Egypt is hit by earthquakes. There's all sorts of examples through ancient history of earthquakes taking down temples and taking down statues, and that these buildings collapsed, killing or wounding or doing some damage to the firstborn, the chosen ones as opposed to the firstborn child of the whole
Right.
thing. And again, so it's that weird mistranslation thing that leads us to the story that we get from the Bible as opposed to potentially what could really have happened.
Also to look at some of the themes that you find recurring in different epochs and in different cultures. It's not just the natural disasters, even though you might find a commonality with a flood myth. You could also find the virgin birth. You could also find the resurrection. These are features that you do find in other religions in various forms.
All of them.
All of them.
All of them.
Wow.
Before I went to Egypt, I don't think we've ever discussed this. Before I went to Egypt, I started looking at creation mythologies across the world, and drawing parallels, because I also believed at the time, whether I still do or not, open for discussion.
Yeah.
But that they were all the same story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when you start looking and you go, well, we've got the Sumerian texts say one thing, the Chinese creation legends say another thing, the Egyptian creation legends say certain things, and so it goes off around the world, and you start finding common things about the flood. The flood thing was a big. I was busy wading through the Icelandic sagas.
Yes.
Trying to get my head around Odin and that whole section, and then I found that there was a flood. When it was one of the giants survived the flood, and it was like, well, here's a repetition that we had before,
over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely, and even like in later times, so like in Central America and like the Mayan, also the land starts. There's nothing. There's just water, and then the land comes out of the water, and we start with those small beings. There's this flood origin that happens everywhere, and even Chinese as well. Same flood story that's there. And I followed this on, and it was kind of interrupted by going to Egypt, and getting sidetracked
by writing your book.
Oh, indeed, indeed. But and you'd find, you say, okay, well, let's look at the goddess Inanna, but she appears as Ishtar in other religions, and yet she does the same things and has the same powers or the same kind of belief structure that circles around her. And you find that all over, and it's incredibly fascinating, creation mythologies. They really are.
That's really beautiful. I think I'm still amazed that there's such a depth of knowledge, and obviously there's so much written about this as well, but do we have enough literature that combines them and makes the link of those commonalities?
I think not, and I think possibly a lot of that is the nature of organized religion, where it's this is my religion, I'm keeping it to myself, you're not allowed to go there. I think there is a lot of that, especially among the major religions. I think they've kept their distance, and you're not allowed to say that. If you say, no, it was all one story and everyone's just repeating the same one, all the religions go, that doesn't fit with what we believe.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're opening a big can of worms there on that one.
That's so sad, though. Isn't that a missed opportunity? And we'll talk about a missed opportunity. I think a really big part of our conversation tonight will be what keeps taking you back to Egypt over and over again. We're going to get there. We're going to take a short break now. This is Reality Radio with me, Jack Devnarain. It's as real as it gets every Friday night from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Tonight, in studio, Ted Loukes, and we're going to be talking to him about his incredible trips and tours to the artifacts and places of beauty in ancient Egypt just after the break. We'll be back.
You're listening to 919. 919. You're listening to 919. 919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024. Or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
It's Friday night, it's reality radio, it's 919, and it's me, Jack Devnarain. Tonight, live in studio, Ted Loukes, my special guest, talking about his incredible research on ancient Egypt, the myths, the magic, the legends. Ted, how often do you return to those beautiful places that you describe in your travels? And I know you're quite active on social media, particularly when it comes to describing the tours that you take. And what's special about those places in particular? Are they off the beaten track? Are they the tourist traps, or are they something completely new and different?
I think what I try and specialize in is the ancient aspect of ancient Egypt. So many of the tours that are there are kind of aimed at the bucket list market, and it's like, well, we'll spend 10 minutes at the pyramids and tick that off, and then we'll put you on a boat and we'll drag you around to various Ptolemaic temples. But they do, and they say these are ancient. You go, not really, they're Greek, you know. So I do very much stick to ancient Egypt, and we take people to all sites from the Old Kingdom, which is right at the beginning, the building of the main pyramids, and various other pyramids are there. We take you to those sites, and as much as possible inside the pyramids, take you into tombs, but we also include museums. So we try and get as much out of the museum as possible. And then we move south to the New Kingdom area, which is Luxor, which was ancient Thebes. And those the kind of era of the really well-known pharaohs, so like Ramses the Great and Tutankhamun and Thutmose III, and that whole selection, and that's the Egypt that you see in Hollywood movies. It's that with all the gold and chariots and that kind of stuff. And we spend a lot of time there. So we try and spend 5 or 6 days in Luxor, just concentrating really on the ancient aspects and looking at tombs, temples, and just the landscape. So although there are certain must-sees, which we will do, there are also other places that perhaps are not included in your average. We're going to do 3 days on the Nile, and we're going to do half an hour here. And those tours, they don't do them; they skip these places. So because they're not the Hollywood names, you know, they're not the So people say, "Oh, we're going to take you to the Valley of the Kings." All well and good. We're going to take you to Deir el-Medina, which was the workman's village, the guys who built the tombs, who did all of the painting and the cutting and stuff. Take you to that village, you know, as well as Valley of the Kings, of course.
Of course.
And suddenly it's a whole different aspect. And then because we're small and independent, we can pick and choose how long we take to be there. We don't rush through stuff. If you want to see something and it's there, then we'll go and see that. And if you want to spend 10 minutes here, that's great. If you want to spend 2 hours there, that's also great. We can make those kind of plans. And over the period of time that we've been going, we've built up quite a nice relationship with various local Egyptians, especially in Luxor, who we can rely on to do things, you know. we just have that. So we can phone and say, well, okay, please bring your vehicle and come and fetch these people and take them to such and such.
Okay.
And I know it will happen. And I
Yeah.
know that they'll get to wherever they're going. And the person who's running the restaurant or wherever they're going to
Yeah.
will look after them.
Because
I
there's
know.
a lot of trust in you, obviously, as an operator, right?
I think so. And I think, yes, that's been cemented over time. So I use the same people all the time.
Sure.
There's a loyalty there. And there's a sense of that I owe them as well. I owe these people. They've looked after me in
Yeah.
all the times that I've been going to Egypt. And that's what keeps me going back. I think it's that we're not doing a kind of bucket list tour, quick stop thing, that we're
Yeah.
doing a proper in-depth thing where we can talk about the history, the reasoning behind stuff,
Sure.
why stuff was done. So I have a little bit of understanding of hieroglyphs in terms of
Okay.
being
Yeah.
able to certainly read like royal names and gods' names and so, and I'd be able
Yeah.
to say to people, this is King whoever in front of Amun
Yeah.
offering libation or whatever. Yeah,
Are
absolutely.
all Egyptian tour operators trained in a similar way to be able to read and interpret?
No.
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 Okay.
So I operate as a tour leader.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So I'm allowed to do that. And where we need guides, I will organize guides
Okay.
and get them. So there are certain places where, strictly speaking, according to the law, you should, if you have a guide, it must be an Egyptian guide who's certified and licensed and the whole
Okay.
thing. And we use those where we need them. So in Cairo, we use them, and there's certain places in Luxor. Other places, we're going to individual tombs and stuff like that, and it's just not necessary. And also, the guides are not allowed in the tombs.
Oh.
They're not allowed to. And a lot of this was when the tourism industry was really rocking in Egypt.
Yeah.
Having a guide with your people would add more time that people were in the tombs. And they wanted to cut that down, so they banned the guides
see.
from going in.
Yeah.
So that if you go somewhere, and I'll go to the Valley of the Kings because I'll come back to that. You go to the Valley of the Kings, your guide will stand outside and he will tell you a little bit, and then you go in and you go, this is fabulous. Do I know what I'm looking at? No. Not in the slightest. Haven't a clue.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to offer a bit more than that, to be able to push that a little bit, to go in people and say, well, look at this. This is famous. This is what you need to see. You need to, if you want a photograph, take this photograph,
Yeah.
not that photograph.
And that's why we are here.
And that's why we're here. The other thing is that on the most of the guided tours that you buy into, when you get to the Valley of the Kings, your limitation is 3 tombs.
Oh, is that it?
3 tombs, not including Tutankhamun, and there are a couple of others that you pay extra.
Yeah.
Okay, so we offer all of the tombs that are open. So, which is usually around about 12, 13, including the ones that you pay extra. All of those tombs,
Yeah.
you can do all of them. We'll spend
That's
the
incredible.
entire day.
That's a huge concession to you.
That's what we try and do because it's important.
Yeah.
That's part of it. It's about ancient Egypt. If you want to go and sit in a perfume factory and go and look at Greek temples, well, do that. But I'm trying to aim at a niche market as
Sure.
opposed to just our bucket list.
Tell
market.
me, are tombs still being discovered today?
Yes.
Like, how long can this keep going on? Surely the places have a particular focus of interest with academics and researchers who are looking and using new technology to try to find different sarcophagi in different areas. How long are we going to keep finding mummified remains, do you think?
I think it was Zahi Hawass, the kind of
Yeah.
well-known television Egyptologist,
Yeah.
who said we've only discovered something like 30%,
Oh,
or something
wow.
like that. And there are new discoveries all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, all the time. There was one, I think, just last week.
Mm-hmm.
So there are areas. So Saqqara is an area just south of Cairo, okay, where most of it's just covered in sand, okay, and they keep finding stuff. They keep finding new stuff because it was the burial place, the cemetery
Okay.
for the whole of Memphis, the ancient capital,
Yeah.
before Cairo and stuff. And so there are just tombs of nobility. They keep finding them. And really, a week ago there was a new find of something like it's 4,300 years old or something like that. They found it was some court official
Yeah.
in one of the early kings, might have even been predated the dating of the Great Pyramid. It was
I
that-
realize now, asking you that question, what a ridiculous question it was, because there's so much yet to be discovered. And it's not just about members of the royal family. There are all kinds of dignitaries and all kinds of areas of historical interest. Even some of the scholars themselves who are yet to be discovered amongst all the treasures that they accumulated over time.
No, absolutely. I think that that what has happened, if you think of Egyptology really kind of taking off in Victorian times, and the Carter discovering Tutankhamun, that kind of put it back into the public eye. A lot of those guys were really looking for treasure. They were looking for gold. They were looking for big finds.
Right.
Those were the important things. Whereas now the focus in archaeology is bizarrely that a piece of pottery could well be far more important than a solid gold piece of jewelry, because the pottery has information on it, and often they use them to write things. So it tells you more about the life of the people and what was going on, which is what archaeology is now, as opposed to just treasure hunting.
See, this is a point that I really want to pick up on, because perhaps our understanding and definition of treasure has changed. Now perhaps it's more focused than ever on its impact in the world of research and understanding new ways of what ancient Egypt was about. The value of the research is possibly more important than its monetary value now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just follow that thought, right?
Okay.
Critical analysis of the artifact is more valuable than its value as an item.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And that's where you sit with your research.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I was just trying to think, am I more valuable than my own treasures?
That would be a real question. Yes, that's real. Well, see, the point I'm getting at is, if the evolution of the appreciation of an artifact has moved us on from this is a treasure that can be redeemed for so many, hundreds of thousands of millions of pounds or dollars or whatever it might be, as opposed to its value in terms of the body of knowledge that it now adds to, then it really points to the need for a greater appreciation of the great minds that can apprehend its value and what it means in relation to everything else.
I think globally, or from a world point of view, it depends how much value you put on knowledge.
On knowledge itself,
exactly. Which
exactly.
is a big thing. Your question just reminds me of a case study that has again just been released, where they're talking about, because they've been doing microscopic and beyond into chemical analysis of cell structures and in animals and also in mummified remains.
Yeah.
Is the level of disease, how much malaria, how much polio or those called tuberculosis existed in societies, and which gives them a great understanding of the time. Is it relevant to now? Is it relevant to the future? Possibly, because usually those diseases are caused by environment.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but I was astounded to see just the percentage of people who were sick in ancient Egypt, according to these studies.
An ancient Egypt COVID coffee pot. That would have been something. But I'm not even going to go into that, Ted.
I'm just wondering where they got the coffee from. The rest of it I can go with. Yeah, absolutely.
But let's pick up on some critical thinking ideas and also to pick up on the celebration of Easter, and how is that expressed in the Egyptian world that you are so in love with. We're going to do that. We're going to take a short break now. This is Reality Radio, coming back into the discussion with Ted Loukes, our specialist adventurer and researcher in the world of ancient Egypt. We'll be back in a few minutes' time. Thank you.
Reality radio, as real as it gets. Only on 919. The Feel Good Drive with Nicole De Silva on 919.
A person with emotion. Being in that space at all, it sort of elevates you to where other people would like to use you. I'm now at a point where I'll say no. So I can see it from a mile away. Someone you don't hear from in forever and always sends you a message. Hey, friend! Friend, long time!
Oh my gosh, what are you up to?
Not even how you, straight into, do you mind doing this for me?
Hell no. Hell no.
I've had to learn how to say no. And then there's not even friends, there's people that work in the industry that like to take advantage.
The Feel Good Drive, 3 to 6 p.m. on 919. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
It's reality radio with me, Jack Devnarain, on 919. It's as real as it gets on a Friday night. And we're going to talk some critical thinking now with our guest, Ted Loukes. Ted, we are talking about the value of artifacts. And that value doesn't so much lie in what it can be traded for, but what it means in the growing body of knowledge accumulated over time by experts who look at the significance of these pieces. So, going back to the time you were in school, you were looking at this, you were 10 years old, you go into the British Museum, you find 50 artifacts describing ancient Egypt. And I'm wondering now, do we get the same kind of interest amongst young people? It's not just about looking at ancient Egypt, it's about looking at science and technology, it's looking at health, it's looking at the world around us. Are we absorbing information in the same way and using it in the same way as perhaps people did years ago?
I don't think that we absorb it in the same way. I think because it's readily available. So before, if I go back to my childhood where we still inscribe stuff in stone,
I believe you.
So you should. Any research you had to go to the library, you had to do whatever, you had to copy stuff out longhand or whatever. That was the way
reams and reams of notes from encyclopedias.
Indeed. And then that was the way that you researched stuff, and that was the way that you kind of increased your own personal knowledge of stuff. Whereas now you don't have to do any of that because you can just search it online.
Yeah.
And you'll have the information that you want directly there in front of you. Whether that information is correct or not is another story.
That's the key.
So what is the value? Are we absorbing that value? I used, when I was writing my book, and it took me about 3 years to write, so I used an incredible amount of online resources.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And online texts, because stuff was available. Yeah. I could go and say, instead of having to go, and I remember one time I had to go to the library at UNISA in Pretoria, because they were the only place in the Southern Hemisphere that had a copy of a particular book that I wanted to look at, and it was only in French. But I wanted to see it, and I went through and trekked through there and found it, and then I wasn't allowed to photocopy it, and it was, anyway. Right. Whereas now, or more recently, many of those texts are readily available. You just need to know where to look, and you can find a PDF copy of a particular book. And it's a lot quicker to do that kind of research than having to trek off to the library. For me, I find reading stuff, I do take it in, I do absorb it, but that's how I learned. I learned to take in information like that. So I do think we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner a little bit with the amount of stuff that is available. And I think people studying, I don't think they put as much importance on having that amount of knowledge.
Yeah.
I don't, and amassing it as well.
Amassing it is the thing.
It's like let me get through my exams, whatever they are. Whether it's higher education or tertiary education or whatever, let me get through them so I've got the piece of paper that just tells me that I'm qualified for a certain job. As opposed to, and it's not for everybody, it's very much a generalization.
Yeah.
As opposed to the people who go, well, actually, I'm fascinated by this subject, and let me really get into it and understand what's going on.
That's the question, the fascination. And one of the interesting and more fascinating things that you mentioned earlier was the practice of a part of the Easter celebration that still happens today in Egypt, 4,000 years after the ritual was first developed.
Indeed. Sham el Nessin,
Yeah.
which beautifully translates to inhale the breeze, is a pharaonic, that far back custom that happens to this day, the day after Easter Sunday in Egypt.
Yeah.
And it's a time where it's usually a holiday for people. Most people are not working. They're out and about. They take boats out onto the river, onto the Nile, with food parcels, and I think it's fish and onions and then also coloured painted eggs. Would you believe it? But that has been going on pretty much uninterrupted since somewhere around 2700 BCE.
Sure.
Which is phenomenal. And really, it was their celebration of spring, and it's
right.
The rebirth, the egg symbolism with rebirth is kind of global. That symbolism, we see it in our own Western, shall I say, Easter celebrations.
And it's with all those icons are important features of the Easter celebration, and I'm the first to say I'm not a religious man, but certainly I look at the symbolism of the egg, and I think perhaps that's more significant than the rabbit that somehow delivers it. A rabbit delivering an egg, to me, presents a logical problem that I can't reconcile.
Well,
so the symbolism of it is what I think refers to its pagan roots.
Yeah. I think that what we see in our traditional Western Easter is a kind of joining together of Christianity and Christianity and what was happening from a pagan, probably even like a more kind of working class belief structure that was going on. And I think we have to thank the Romans for managing that so well. But they did the same with Christmas. So instead of going and stamping out what was, they amalgamated everything together. Yeah. And because the Romans pushed Christianity, once they converted to Christianity, the Romans pushed it quite hard. And so I think we do get that. The hare thing, the rabbit thing, the hare was very much a spring symbol. So again, and again goes back to, I'm not sure the origin. I think there's a lot of Scandinavian origins of the original Easter goddess was very much a goddess of spring and rebirth, and there was something to do with she could either turn into a hare or she was accompanied by hares or whatever, along with eggs. And so all of that symbology, I think, is very, very pagan. I think, for want of a better word. I'm not sure if I really like the word pagan anymore.
Okay. Well, have you been to one of those celebrations that you described now in Egypt?
No, unfortunately not, because the one time that I was there in Easter was during lockdown. And nobody was allowed on the Nile at all. They shut it down. The whole, because it's a family thing, and it was so you get families and extended families. Everybody's out on the Nile. And they just shut it down and said, no, it's not happening this year. And it didn't happen. Everyone, excuse me, everyone was very upset about it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a big joyous occasion, for Egyptians.
Besides the study of ancient Egypt and all its magnificent places of interest, What else draws you to Egypt time and time again?
The obvious ones, I think, are things like the food, the climate. I love all of those things.
All of those things.
Indeed, I love them. The food is delightful. The climate is superb. Having spent half my life living in England, the climate in Egypt is superb, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But I think really my biggest draw, other than the antiquities, are the people.
Mm-hmm.
The people of Egypt are, and again, this is a generalization, but the ones that I have met and come across and interacted with are the kindest, most helpful, delightful people you would ever wish to come across.
Mm-hmm.
They really are genuinely good people, and that's how they like to portray themselves. They're helpful, they're useful, and I think that perhaps they're somewhat tarnished by tourists who fall into that trap of saying, well, I'm a tourist and I expect everything to be just how it is when I'm at home.
Right.
And this is not okay. Why can't I get McDonald's here?
Right, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that. But I have nothing but praise for them as people. And they're a big draw card to my personally wanting to go back. So I go back because I enjoy taking people. I enjoy showing them this stuff. I think fundamentally the sharing of knowledge is more important and perhaps more enjoyable to me than the acquiring it.
That's incredible.
I've acquired a lot of knowledge. I say that without wishing to sound arrogant in any way, but I have a lot of knowledge. Whether any of it's useful or not is a different story, another conversation. But to be able to share that with people, to be able to take them to such and such a site and say, look, this is whatever this is, and to watch their faces as they get it, and they suddenly, you just see them just like change. There's a whole change in their demeanor and everything, because it's something that's so out of their comfort zone and out of their zone of reference, and to be able to give that to people is fantastic, and it's so rewarding. It really is rewarding.
I see so much of that, Ted, in the sense that we can all be trapped in our little media realities where it's almost an echo chamber of the kind of content that we like, that helps us to construct the reality of the world that we live in, that doesn't survive challenges from outside, whether it's an historical challenge or a challenge in our perspective on lives and truths and people. And we don't like to be challenged generally.
No, we don't.
So you have those people coming into a place like this, and suddenly they're faced with an historic reality that tells them that this is how people lived, perceived the world around them. And in many senses, that reality still persists. It's still alive. It's a living history. What do people go looking for when they take these tours with you? Are they looking for something to challenge them, something that will help to reassure them?
I think I'd like to say no to that. I think the majority of the people who I've been with, it has been a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
To do those things. But I think once they're there, I think they get taken away from that, and they start to understand that actually what they've signed up for is not what they thought they were signing up for.
Yeah.
And I think it's more than that. And there are, there's occasion for philosophical discussions because of what's in front of you, and you have to go, well, why was this? Why did this happen? Why is this built? What was the understanding of this? And especially when we touch on the whole the whole area of mortality.
Right, the afterlife and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And people have said, but the Egyptians, they're all obsessed by death. They were absolutely not.
Yeah.
They were all obsessed by life. They were incredibly aware of life, and death was merely a continuation of life. And that's why, and I'm not talking about the royal tombs, but if you look at the tombs of nobles, of courtiers and stuff like that, their tombs are full of aspects of their life that they want to carry on into the next. When they enter the field of reeds, they want to carry on drinking the same wine. They want to carry on having the same harvest. They want to carry on having the same sex.
Yeah.
It's all there in their tombs.
I can think of nothing more validating than saying, I lived such an incredible life that I want to live it in the same way, perhaps in another space and time altogether. It's a wonderful thought, and I really appreciate that you have taken the time to share so many of your thoughts with us, sharing all your research and your ideas and your reflections. And certainly I hope that there'll be so many more people joining your tours to Egypt, learning about ancient Egypt and the myths and the legends that you've learned so well. So thank you for joining us, Ted.
No, thanks for asking me, Jack. It's an honor to be here, and thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That's wonderful. This is Reality Radio, and it's 919. It's a Friday night. Join us again next Friday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. for more Reality Radio. It's as real as it gets on a Friday night.